To the debate desk. Amy Fisher is a former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party. Matthew Hulbert, the Liberal Democrat activist, with us as well. Amy, what did you make of those sentiments from Andrew Rossendale?
Well, look, Andrew is from a particular wing of the Conservative Party, so I'm not necessarily surprised if he's expressing that as his personal view. I mean, I think it's an absolute...
He's a frontbencher, though.
He is a frontbencher, but it's not that many people to pick from at the moment, if we're being honest about where the Conservative Party is as a whole at the moment. I think it's spectacularly unhelpful. The Conservative Party, as you know, the end of its conference on Wednesday proved, has still got some life in it. And actually, after Kemi's speech, was polling a bit higher than Reform than they have been in recent months, and are still trusted by people.
Heck of a long way to go if they're going to make any impact in the next election.
I think my problem is the Conservatives trying to form any closer, if not alliance, or kind of pact with them. Is Reform is quite a different beast from the Conservative Party. I mean, I think Reform was sort of almost National Socialist, actually, in terms of some of what they're... National
Socialist?
Yes. Honestly, they're striking.
You know who the National Socialists were?
I'm not saying they are Nazis. Please don't put those words into my mouth. But in terms of what some of the politics, particularly on economics, are espousing, are singly very right-wing and left-wing in terms of massive amounts of public spending combined with tax cuts and all the rest of it. So I think the Conservatives, in any way moving or being seen to move closer towards them, would be spectacularly wrong right at the moment. As I say, that after conference, Kemi has shown that there might be life left in the Conservatives as yet.
Matthew, thoughts?
Well, I think the Tories are dying, politically speaking, and that it couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of people. We saw this week half-empty halls, even when people like supposed big beasts like Mel Stride were speaking. There was barely anyone there. They just about managed to get enough people in to listen to Kemi Badenoch, but I think they're a dying political breed. And in terms of Dem and Reform, I say let them keep attacking each other. Hopefully they'll continue to split each other's votes, and the likes of the Lib Dems will benefit.
Amy?
But this is exactly my point. I don't see as why Conservatives or Reform should be, quote, splitting each other's votes, because they're not espousing the same things.
You accept they do, though, right? You accept they do split the. They do.
But anybody in any constituent is splitting the votes. I mean, as I understand it, you sort of come from a Liberal Democrat, sort of background. I mean, anybody is splitting anybody's votes at any point in any constituency. That is the nature of voting, and the whole point of political parties is to try and convince as many people as possible to vote for them. Yeah, my whole point being that the Conservative Party does espouse, and should continue to espouse, a very different set of values and policies from those that Reform are putting forward.
I'm pleased that it's happening on the right now. For all these decades on the left, the vote has been split between the Greens and the Lib Dems and Labour and whoever else. Now it's happening on the right,
on the left
and the Tories don't like
because
it's happening on the left as well, of course.
Well, we've got your party, which could take, or whatever it's called, which could take 10% of the vote. You've got the Green Party, which is in the insurgency with the breast enlargement guy, Zach Polanski. You've got the Lib Dems, who are polling fine. They've got the 72 MPs. Some polls say they could even put on a few MPs, and Labour, who are tanking. So that's pretty split as well. But the
Tories have pretty much always had it their own way, haven't they? And they're not now.
Well, what's interesting from... I don't think Ian Duncan-Smith would necessarily agree with you. I think the point that I was putting to Andrew Rossendale as well is that his party leader, Kemi Badenoch, has said, I think one of the most effective things she said in the last 14 months was that Nigel Farage and the policies of Reform UK, in her view, to Amy's point, were Corbynism with a union flag.
And that's what I meant, actually, by saying national. I shouldn't maybe have used the word National Socialist, and I want to be very clear. I'm not saying
sure, you've made that clear.
So, and this is what I mean about they are. That is clear. What Reform are espousing in terms of their policies are clearly distinct from what the Conservatives stand for. So, to what you're saying about, there is no then need to actually kind of split the vote because. It's fish and fowl. They're not the same.
Well,
it's not the same thing they're
certainly
saying.
Reform are attempting to do something quite interesting, which is to be kind of socially, culturally right, but to be really quite big states.
So they're not the same as the Conservative Party.
So they're not the same. not suggesting that they are the same as the
So therefore, there is
Conservatives. I'm
no
just saying
reason
the fact that they have split each other's votes up to now. But I think, you know, I think for the Lib Dems, hopefully it's good news, because what One Nation Tory is going to want to stay in this Conservative Party. They're not. And in effect, you know, I've heard Conservative commentators say, actually, let's be rid of the One Nation Tories. They're Lib Dems anyway. Well, good. Let them come over to the Lib Dems. We'll welcome them.
Well, people will obviously make their own decisions, but I'm sort of slightly surprised by your sweeping statement about, you know, this is the end of One Nation conservatism. I mean, quite literally, I think the conference this week showed exactly the opposite, that, you know, that there is life in the Conservative Party, and that is not me denying that.
The empty halls? What was going on there?
Well, I mean, let's not talk about empty halls at conference, because I don't think necessarily any party, if we...
even when supposed big fees are speaking? If
we counter support for any particular political party by purely counting
Tory
the heads...
conference used to be in big auditoriums.
Let her speak.
If we judged political support for any particular political party by the number of heads in a conference hall, I'm not sure that's where, you know, the Lib Dems...
Those pictures looked awful. I'm not going to be told
they did look awful.
I'm not claiming they looked brilliant, but my point is I don't think counting heads in the hall at conference is a particularly accurate indicator of support for any particular political party, be it Lib Dem, Conservative,
but the polls are, and they're not great either,
anybody else.
Mel Stride, perhaps not the world's best speechmaker, although for Robert Jenrick and for Kemi Badenoch, there was a full hall. Anyway, we're going to talk more about political abuse. We're having a very civilised conversation, but political abuse hasn't gone too far. We have the leader of the TUC calling both Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, and Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, racists. We also have Zarah Sultana saying we need to fight fascists in the streets. We'll look at those two clips in a second. We'll get the views of Amy and Matthew, and your view too. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us. Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Alison in Billericay, who says, I don't think the Conservatives are refusing to work with Reform. I think it's the other way around. I've recently heard two shadow ministers say they would like to make a deal with Reform for the good of the nation, and that Reform batted it away. They can have a coalition after the election. Surely there's no way Nigel would stand down candidates. I think someone voting Reform would never vote Tory and vice versa now. Alison, it's a really good point, and I kind of slightly put that actually to Andrew Rossendale as well. What's in this for Reform? I can see what's in it for the Conservatives. I can't see what's in it for Reform because they're so far ahead at the moment. Right then, we're on the debate desk with Amy Fisher and Matthew Hulbert, and I want to talk about the question we're asking today, which is, has political abuse gone too far? I want to play you two examples from the recent past of contributions which may not necessarily be that helpful. One is Zarah Sultana, the leader of your party, or whatever it's called today, who said that we should fight fascists in the streets if necessary. Let's see what she has had to say.
And the results are clear for everyone to see. The largest fascist mobilisation in Britain in recent memory. Reform is their parliamentary and political vehicle, and Farage gives them their parliamentary face. But the politics behind it is the same poison that fuels the far right in our streets. And I spoke at the Tommy Robinson demonstration because we have a duty to fight back. If we don't fight back, the far right will keep filling that vacuum that has been created by Labour's capitulation and a broken political system. And we must be clear, you don't stop fascism by ignoring it or copying it. You stop it by fighting it at the ballot box, and where necessary, you fight the fascists in the streets.
Where necessary, you fight fascists in the streets. That is a member of Parliament saying that, advocating violence, possibly even inciting violence. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Also, Paul Nowak, who is the head of the Trades Union Congress, one of the biggest unions in this country, said this about Nigel Farage and Robert Jenrick.
Voting Reform doesn't make you a racist. Worrying about your wages, your bills and the cost of living crisis doesn't make you a racist. And wanting a fair, sensible approach to migration doesn't make you a racist. But I tell you what does make you a racist. Threatening to deport people who came to this country to live and work, no matter how long they've been here, no matter how hard they've worked, how much they've contributed, or whether or not they've raised their family. Or walking around one of our major cities and complaining that you don't see any white faces, presumably because both your eyes and your mind are closed. And equating being British to being a white white, privately educated Tory xenophobe. So here's the truth. If you talk like a racist, if you walk around with your little camera making films that make you sound like a racist, you probably are a racist.
Amy Fisher.
To the first comments, I do believe the MP came quite close to almost inciting violence on the street. To her first point about, of course, you should absolutely fight fascism at the ballot box. I mean, that's a given. Fascism should be fought. But then there are other routes to pushing back on people who hold fascist thoughts through the courts, through police. I don't think we should be talking about fighting them in the streets. Fighting them on the streets, you know, in terms of physical engagement. I think that's just incredibly dangerous if you hear an elected member of Parliament saying such things. As to the gentleman's last point,
Paul Nowak,
thank you. Gosh, he was conflating an awful lot of things there. I don't think there's any particular point me trying in the few seconds available to try and unpick any particular party's policies on immigration or otherwise, but he did seem to be conflating bits about illegal immigration with legal immigration, and then conflating it with actually Rob Jenrick's very unfortunate comments earlier this week in terms of seeing white faces and what, you know, the Shadow Justice Secretary may or may not have wanted to be getting at in terms of integration. But the whole tone of both of those clips I don't think necessarily has quite a public place, because I do believe when people are making such statements, they should not be inflaming what can be very high emotions about these subjects anyway, and both of them, I think, were seeking to do so in a very unhelpful way.
I want to talk to Nigel in London in a second, but just briefly, Matthew, your views on those?
Well, I think Robert Jenrick's comments were more than just unfortunate. I think they were...
Racist?
I think they were disgraceful, and I'll choose my own words. I think they were appalling and disgraceful, and as Andy Street, former mayor of the West Midlands, said on TV this week, were factually wrong. And I trust the...
Well, they're not factually wrong.
I trust the former mayor of the West Midlands more than I do Robert Jenrick.
If Robert Jenrick factually did not see another white face for 90 minutes and he says, I didn't see another white face, that is a fact.
Well, he says that.
You don't believe him?
No.
OK. Nigel's in London. Nigel's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Nigel, you're very welcome to the programme. You're on with me and also Amy Fisher and Matthew Hulbert. What would you like to say?
Well, good morning, Peter, and
morning.
Your guests. There are two things I'm going to take away from this discussion this morning. The first thing that I think I'm going to take away is it seems to be palatable for a lot of people who don't want to condemn anti-Semitism on the streets and slogans and everything else, but are happy to condemn a politician who's from a different political background, the right wing. And I think what's interesting about Robert Jenrick, the problem I think that he has with what he said was his language could have been slightly different, I think. And I think what he should have said, in my opinion, I've walked around this part of Birmingham and other parts of Birmingham, and in this area, all I've seen, I haven't seen a white face. I think that his delivery and language was slightly, I think, could have been better. But taking back to my first point, which really does annoy me, is that people are very happy to jump on the bandwagon that waving a union flag, you're a right-wing thug or a right-wing racist, but they don't condemn anti-Semitism. In the same way, are they condemning Robert Jenrick?
Nigel, thank you. Those are good points. Let's put them to Amy and Matthew, and then I promise I'll come back to you in just a second. Matthew, what do you make of what Nigel is saying there?
Well, of course we should condemn any kind of racism, including anti-Semitism. It's absolutely abhorrent. And the fact that Jewish people are going around this country in fear, I mean, I didn't realise, to my shame, I didn't realise until the attack the other week, that Jewish schools have to have security, etc.
You didn't realise that?
I'm afraid I didn't realise that. Yeah. I realised it of synagogues. I didn't realise it of
I've been banging on to you and others for the last 2 years about the levels of anti-Semitism in this country, and it worries me that people are. I mean, they've got freedom of expression and freedom of association and freedom to protest, but there are people on the streets today who have previously said ceasefire now. There is a ceasefire, and I would question why they're on the streets today.
Well, I think we're seeing the nasty elements of people who say they're claiming to fight for Palestinians, a cause I very much strongly believe in as well. But I think we're seeing the truth of the nastier elements, that they're not really for...
Well, they've been there for the last 2 years. And
yeah,
I've been saying that.
Yeah, I don't deny. And sadly, they've been mixed in with people who genuinely care for the people of Gaza and who will be happy that there is now a ceasefire.
Yeah, but you've changed your tune slightly. Go ahead.
but no sane person does not care about the people of Gaza. So if I understood the point the caller was making, there does seem to be a disparity between, you know, being able to fly, say, the St George's flag and it be ripped down for fear it might cause offence or be racist, which is kind of a nonsense if you think about it, that you can't fly the flag.
Do you know the motive of every single person that's put up a Union Jack or a
Do you
or a
know
St
the
George's
motive
flag?
of every single person that walks in a pro-Palestinian march?
And I've just condemned the nasty elements. The difference
No,
is, will you condemn, Amy, the nastier elements of those?
Yes, of course.
Oh, good. Okay, well, fair enough.
Of course, but my point is where councils have had a policy of blanketly putting down Union Jack flags because
well, I guess they can't go around everyone's house, can they?
No. So they're making the assumption that everybody who flies a Union Jack flag has some nefarious purpose.
Well, they're in a difficult position then, aren't they? Because they can't.
But do you not see the disparity here? That councils are putting down Union Jack flags because they're assuming that everyone who flies them has a nefarious
which clearly isn't the
point.
case.
Which clearly, that is what I wanted to say.
And there have been numerous occasions when councils have physically taken down Union flags and not taken down Palestinian flags. I will go back to Nigel, but he's disappeared. Lots more to discuss in a minute or two. And Suze has been in touch saying, thank you for having Matthew Hulbert on the show. That's confirmed. I will never vote Lib Dem. I've moved from Conservative to Reform, and he is wrong about most Reform voters being ex-Conservatives.
One of my many fans.
I've been to several Reform UK meetings recently in working men's clubs, and there have been as many ex-Labour as ex-Conservatives in the room. Sean in Bridlington says these lefties using fighting talk against political rivals need to be more careful. The ones they are threatening are silent and a lot more capable than gobby lefties, says Sean in Bridlington, talking about Zarah Sultana there. Sarah from Stockton in Teesdale says it must be Tory candidates who stand down to ensure a reform government if a deal is done. Would Andrew be willing to do this for his country? Oh, it's a very interesting point, Sarah. I should have asked him and I didn't. Jack in Gravesend says, sorry to disagree, not a lot we disagree on. I think Mel Stride performed much better than both Badenoch and Photogenic. I like that, Photogenic. That's good, that's a good nickname. I mean, Mel Stride, I think he is, you know, he's a good interviewee. I think he's a decent guy who contributes to the show fairly often. Is he as good a communicator as Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch? I don't think so. But listen, on this programme, we disagree without being disagreeable. More of that in just a minute. Stay with us. Jeff is in Aberdeenshire and says Reform's biggest problem is the apathy of the people. They need people to vote. Unfortunately, no one trusts any politician. Nigel is trying by being honest and truly passionate about his cause, says Jeff. Another person says when you have a politician using language such as we need to fight on the streets, you know we're in a very dark situation. Those intended to lead and guide us are behaving utterly reprehensibly. Now, more lies, rhetoric, noise and deception. We're a whisker away from civil unrest and I want to leave now. Leslie says the union leader calling Nigel and Jenrick fascists is labelling those who would vote for either as fascists. He actually called them racists rather than fascists, but yeah, Leslie, your point stands. Amanda says sadly the quality of the politicians these days leaves much to be desired. The spite and vitriol of the left does them no favours, as all decent voters can clearly see them for who and what they are. Let's talk about another couple of stories in the news today. 2.5 million British people are now using weight loss jabs. As someone who is overweight myself, I would be lying to say that I haven't thought about it myself, but I am worried about these jabs and the effects that they have, so I haven't used them, and I do wonder about the wisdom and the long-term effects. Amy, when you see that Britain's increasing reliance on medication means 1 in 20 adults has turned to the drugs, rarely available in the NHS, what are your thoughts?
These sort of weight loss drugs seem to have come out of nowhere in the last couple of years, so maybe it's just sort of my ignorance, but I'm not quite sure we do fully understand the long-term effects of it.
No, I think you're absolutely right.
And that's just the sort of medical side of it, and then I kind of worry about the other side if people see them as kind of a quick fix and don't necessarily address other things around, you know, sort of diet and exercise, and if we just kind of get ourselves into a mindset society of, oh, a jab will fix this.
Yeah, just take a pill, it'll solve it.
Just take a pill, that's not quite good for kind of self-responsibility, and then, you know, further ongoing reliance on the NHS to just fix all our ills and the kind of the abrogation of self-responsibility to do as much as you can to protect your own health.
Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I broadly agree. So I'm clearly a big guy, but not as big as I was, as you know. Peter,
you've lost a lot of weight recently. You've been doing really well.
Thank you, and you know, much more still to go. And as it happens, I've done it without the jabs. I've done it via eating better and healthier, and exercising more, go out for lots of walks now, or I hardly used to walk anyway if I didn't have to. And that's good for your mental health too. But I've always said, however, that if I felt, because actually I've just made myself a note here, these were originally for diabetics, so I'm a type 2 diabetic. These were originally for diabetics before they became much more popularly used. And so the irony is that I've lost this weight without having to have these jabs. But if I felt that I needed to, and through the doctors, I would. So I'm not condemning those that do use them. But I agree with you, Amy, that the worry is that people are reliant on them, and then when they come off them, assuming they do, they just go back to how they were before.
Yeah, well, if you don't change your lifestyle, it's going to happen. We've also seen the thing with Wegovy and Mounjaro and Ozempic as well is they don't just take the weight off; they take muscle mass as well.
Well, this is
so when you see, Simon Cowell's face collapse.
I was about to say, when you sort of see the effect on the sort of celebrity pack, this is where you get sort of ghastly photos, this sort of horribly veiny hands and necks and all of this kind of thing. But this is to my point about. Yes, there is the weight loss effect, but I'm just not really clear exactly, what the sort of longer-term effects on the rest of your body, not just the immediacy of losing some weight pretty quickly.
Aren't lots of MPs supposed to be allegedly?
Yes, they absolutely are. They absolutely
there
are.
There are people that I have seen very, within 6 months, or you sort of do a double take and think, gosh, is that? There was
one parliamentarian, it would be wrong of me to say who it was, who I had a coffee with, and I did not recognise her.
Yeah.
I literally did not recognise her.
In a bad way?
I mean, she looks fine, but I did not recognise her. She'd lost so much weight.
That's the thing, I chat to my diabetes nurse about this, and I say that, I don't want to be one of these people that, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but who loses a lot of weight and just looks gaunt. I don't want to be
totally that. Simon Cowell's face.
I want to do it in a way which is sustainable.
To be fair, I think Simon Cowell might have done other things to his face as well as losing some weight.
I wouldn't like to speculate on that. Briefly, British holidaymakers travelling to France facing tougher border checks than anywhere else in the UK. This is from tomorrow. Travellers are going to face 4-hour delays to get into France under new rules that require them to undergo face and fingerprint scans. Brief reaction, Amy?
I mean, it's not really a surprise, is it? This is one of the absolute sort of points about sort of Brexit and the free freedom of movement and all the rest of it. I mean, it's thoroughly unsurprising, and I guess people are just going to have to put up with it if they want to go to France. Well, I find it slightly ironic that the French are it's a rather cheap point to make, the French are sort of so good at making life difficult for people to get into the country, yet seem to be less good at stopping them get out of it on the small boats as and when they choose to
Right, Matthew, time to blame Brexit. Off you go.
Yeah, another disastrous result of Brexit I've got written here, and indeed it is. And it's funny, isn't it, that the aforementioned Mr Farage never seems to mention it these days. Why is that? Why is the word banned from his lips? I'll tell you why, because it's been a blooming disaster. That's why.
Let's remind ourselves about what Andrew Rossendale said about Nigel Farage, and indeed his own party leader, in regard to discussions about mergers or some sort of deal. Andrew Rossendale was on the show a little bit earlier this hour. This is what he said. Your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, called Nigel Farage's politics Corbynism with a union flag. Do you disagree with
Nigel's a Thatcherite. He was a member of the Conservative Party. He's certainly not left-wing, and he's not a socialist, and anyone that says that, I'm afraid that isn't correct. I've known him a long time, and I know absolutely he's not like that, and I think that all these insults backwards and forwards have to stop. At the end of the day, our country should come first, and if it means working together with like-minded parties to rescue Britain from this far-left government, we should put our country first rather than party advantage.
Not what Kemi Badenoch has been saying. Matthew?
He sounds like a big fan of Mr Farage, doesn't he? Do you think he's about to be the next one to... I
did ask him that, Amy.
Look, one of your callers made the point earlier that sort of at this point reform wouldn't actually themselves get much out of having a deal with the Conservative Party, but I stand by my point that I made earlier, which is the Conservatives and reform do not have the same politics. Therefore, a pact is for the birds. They're not espousing the same things. They don't have the same principles.
Thank you both very much. Great debate desk this morning. Matthew Hulbert, the Liberal Democrat activist, and Amy Fisher, the former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party. Thank you both very much for joining me. Thank you to everybody else who has been in touch as well, including Massimo from Great Bowden. Why are the left, who bang on about being the good guys, always so aggressive towards females? Your Lib Dem guest is very aggressive towards Amy. I don't think you are, actually. I think, Amy, did you feel he was aggressive towards you?
A robust debate, hopefully.
No, not particularly. We ended up agreeing.
Yeah. Well, there we are. So I think Amy's fine with that. Also, another person says, Matthew, not knowing the level of anti-Semitism, he says, do you know the motive of everyone putting up a union flag? Does he know the motive of everyone flying the Palestine flag? How on earth can he not know the level of anti-Semitism? And if he doesn't, why on earth is a so-called expert on your show? Okay, well, listen, I think he's answered that point. And Pauline says Matthew's insured I'll never vote Lib Dem. And far too much talk, says David, of political hatred rhetoric originating from US politics has been copied in the UK. It's just divided the US electorate and failed electorally as far as the Democrats were concerned and should be dropped here.